Hope everybody had a nice afternoon. Mine was uneventful, so I enjoyed it. Those are the best ones, are they not? Call your attention over to First John chapter 2 and verse 15. And we read over there, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now, can we love anything in this world? Can we love a sunset? Can we love a songbird? Can we love creation? Of course we can. We can appreciate those things if you will. We can enjoy the splendor of God's creation. But we must reject everything in this world, the comforts, conveniences, modern inventions. Um, we don't have to give them up, but if we worship them, that's when they replace God, if you will, because I would argue things that replace God or come before God, those are our idols. Those are the things that take away from us. So, could it be that the world has a different meaning here? Granted, we don't have to give up those comforts and convenience. We don't have to give up our hopes. We don't have to. Um, some religious practices thinks that you can't have electricity and those type things. So if anyone loves the world, they love. What do they love? And that's what we're going to look here tonight. I think there's going to be three categories that we're going to find here: the lust of the world, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life are the three things that we cannot love. We can appreciate the other things of this world. Like I say, it is God's creation. God created the world. He created everything that is living here on this earth, and we can enjoy those things. But what is meant by here, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Again, I would argue that the first one that I would consider, or that I'll try to persuade you that is that we cannot love the lust of the world. The lust of the world. This would be the desiring things unconditionally forbidden. Unconditionally forbidden. Consider Galatians chapter 5, 19 through 21. It says, now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So these are unconditionally forbidden. He puts he says right there at the end in the last sentence, those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So those things are forbidden. Those things are of the world. Those are not of God. Those are things that God would have us not to do. Sexual immorality, dissensions, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, envy, drunkenness. We probably all know somebody who's practiced drunkenness at one time or another in their life, may still do. But we cannot participate in those things. We cannot conduct ourselves in such fashions. Those are things that are certainly unconditionally forbidden in the scriptures. In other words, there's no condition that we can justify in allowing us to act out those conditions, if you will. Is there ever a time for jealousy? No. Is there ever a time for enmity or strife? No. Now, we should hate the world. We should, don't get me certainly about that. But as far as the things in the world, those are things that are unconditionally forbidden. And that's not, and again, this list is not exhaustive. He says there in verse 21, and things like these. So, if we're keeping a mental checklist, if you will, we just don't stop with this list here. There's like however, comma, and things like these, if you will, there's other things that are not mentioned here that are forbidden. The next one are things that are conditionally forbidden. These, we may have liberty at some time to do them. There might be a time rightly to do them, but not always. Consider First Corinthians chapter 8, verses 9 through 13. But it says, take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you have knowledge eating in the idol's temple, will he not be encouraged if his conscience is weak to eat foods offered by idols? And so by your knowledge, this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died, thus sinning against your brothers and wounding their conscience when it is weak. When you sin against Christ, therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. So now we're getting into probably areas of scruples, right? These are things that maybe somebody considers to be sinful, but the Bible does not outright forbid them. There may be nothing wrong with doing them. As Paul points out, especially in Romans, meat is meat. But it wasn't that way to the Jewish brethren, was it? And so there became a rift between the Jews and the Gentiles about where the meat came from. And Paul's pointing out here for those that are, a little bit more wiser, maybe have a little bit more freedom in Christ. In other words, they recognize that meat is meat. It doesn't, to you, it doesn't matter where you buy that meat because you recognize it that it's just meat. But for the one who doesn't recognize it as meat, for the one whose conscience maybe is weaker, if they see you eating in an area that traditionally ate meat or served meat of idols, this might cause them to stumble and go against their conscience. So these things are things like this would be conditionally forbidden. Meaning that we don't want to violate somebody else's conscience. We don't want to cause somebody to go against their conscience that when they think something that is a sin. 1 Corinthians 10:6 says, now these things took place as an example for us that we might not desire evil as they did. And so we shouldn't desire to do evil in people's eyes, even though it may not be evil in and of itself, but to some that it might be. So it's, like I say, it's conditionally forbidden. Some other areas of the lust of the flesh is desiring things exclusively. Considering 1 Corinthians 9:25. Says every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They did it to receive a perishable wealth, but we an imperishable wealth. So what's he talking about here? Exercises self-control. The athlete, does things, in order to obtain one thing. In other words, one can be controlled by desire for food, clothing, etc., rather than being controlled. In other words, an athlete is able to exercise self-control over things like the type of food that they eat or the type of activities that they participate in, because they know that it will hinder their ability to perform at an elite level. Same thing when it comes to us. We need to be careful not to desire things excessively. Desiring things excessively to the point that it interferes with us and God. One can be controlled by desire for a hobby, recreation, or even work. In other words, I enjoy going fishing. there's nothing wrong with going fishing, but when I start putting going fishing ahead of coming to church, well, then maybe it's a problem. Or I don't think it's really maybe it's a problem. It is a problem. Same way with recreational activities. There's nothing wrong in participating in sports, but when those sports start interfering with your ability to worship God and with the congregation that you attach yourself to, now it becomes a problem. Now you're putting those recreational events or those recreational activities before God. And same way when it comes to work. Now, it's one thing when we're compelled to work, but then it's another thing when we desire to work. Often overtime can be compelled as being required. In other words, you mandatory overtime. Anybody that's ever worked an hourly job's probably experienced that one time or another. But then there's also times when that overtime isn't mandatory, but it's offered up. If it falls on a Sunday, is that a good time for you to volunteer to work those overtime hours? Yeah, granted, the money's nice. Don't get me wrong, but then look at it from the context of God. How would God feel, or how would put it? Would you work that overtime or that voluntary overtime if it's going to take away from you from being at your children's special event or your child's birthday party or whatever that is? Probably not, right? We don't want to see the sadness in their eyes when we tell them that we can't be there because Dad wants to earn a few extra dollars. Or we probably wouldn't be even honest with them to that level. We'd probably tell them that we had to work that day, right? Then why is it when it comes to God that our conscience isn't violated? It doesn't bother our conscience. We don't consider how God may look upon those things when it falls upon a Sunday, upon a day of worship. Just something to consider. Granted, there are times, like I say, that we don't have that luxury. There's times when employers mandate that we be there, and that's certainly okay. The next area that we want to consider is lust of the eyes. Lust of the eyes. Lust of the eyes is a love of this world, or it causes the love of this world. The forbidden fruit in Eden was pleasant to the eyes. Over there in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6, it says, "So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes." In other words, it was probably a shiny, or probably a bright color. A lot of artists depict the apple. It might have been a bright, shiny red. I saw something on TV. They're trying to outlaw colored dyes in food because there's evidence that these dyes cause harm in some people, not all people. Long-term exposure causes harm, but the whole idea of those dyes really is not to enhance the flavor, but to enhance the appeal of the thing that you're eating. Especially cereal, Saturday morning cereal or the kids' cereal. Why is it all those, pink and red and rainbow colors? Why? To make it appealing. If it was its natural color, they'd probably go, "Ooh, I don't like that. It doesn't look very good." But when it's brightly colored, now all of a sudden it's appealing. So it's probably the same thing with my point is, it's the same thing with the fruit or the forbidden fruit in the garden. When she finally gazed upon it or considered it, it says it was a delight to the eyes. So in other words, she lusted after it, if you will, to a certain degree, to the point to where she violated God's law in partaking of the fruit. Lot's choice of land began with what? Lust of the eyes. Genesis chapter 13 and verse 10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot's choice, if you recall, Abraham and Lot, they went to this valley, and he says, one way he looked at it was kind of an arid desert type terrain. Looked to the other way, and it was this lush garden, well watered, green. So which one did Lot choose? Lush and green. David's sin with Bathsheba began with the eyes, did it not? Over in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2, it says, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and that she was very beautiful. If David was never up on that rooftop, if David never saw Bathsheba, he probably wouldn't have committed that sin. But because he was up there, some would say he was being idle. Doesn't say that, but that might be one conclusion that you drew. But nonetheless, when he looked across the rooftops and saw a woman in her nakedness and saw that she was beautiful, it caused him to lust after her, and then led to the death of her husband, all because of what he saw. So, even the Lord says, looking upon a woman to lust. Matthew chapter 5, verse 28 says, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Again, it begins with the eyes. Theft, shoplifting, etc. It always begins with the eyes. We see something that looks appealing, or those who participate in these activities, they look at something, they see that it's appealing, they want it, they take it. Sparkly jewelry thieves, whatever it is, whether, car thieves, do they just steal any vehicle? No, they steal what? The ones that are most popular, the ones that they know that they can sell, that people desire. It's the ones that look good. Advertising capitalizes upon this. In other words, we probably all heard that sex sells. Scantily dressed women holding products. What does baby lotion have to do with a woman wearing a bathing suit? Nothing, but that's what they put on her in order to sell the product. It's all over. What does a frosty beverage have to do with women in bikinis? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But that's what we see on TV. Even going through the mall, you see now Victoria's Secrets. They got all these, beautiful models that are modeling their products, and men desire their wives to buy those same products, hoping that that's what they'll see when they get home at night. It's all capitalizes on the lust of the eyes, the appeal of what looks good. Why do people wear immodest apparel? It's so that others may look upon them and what? Think that they look good, lust after them. They want to accentuate their assets, as they would say. So therefore, they wear clothing that shows those things. That all is lust of the eyes. those are all things that we should not or need not participate in because it shows a love of this world. All those things are forbidden unconditionally. The next one is the pride of life. Pride of life is a love of this world as well. Pride is a powerful thing, is it not? It causes us all to stumble from one time or another. The pride of being fashionable can lead to sin. The idea of being cool or happening or trendy, if you will. Consider Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, where Paul writes, I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Perfect in appearance, perfect in speech, not using foul language, not using innuendos, not using harsh speech, if you will, condescending speech. In behavior or lifestyle, a lifestyle that would be considered holy, not one that's caught up in lewdness and lasciviousness and those things. Pride of life can cause all that, especially for somebody who is considered to be good looking, you know. Those can be vices. The pride, notoriety can lead to sin. Over in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 5, it says, they do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. You know, again, he's talking about the Pharisees over there. Pharisees would pray in the middle of the road. Why pray in the middle of the road? You know, they did it and Christ told them, you know, you pray to be seen by men. You received your reward. The thing that you're praying for. Now they may not have been vocalizing that. They may have not been saying, "Hey, Lord, I'm sitting here. I want everybody to see how holy I am." But that's what they were thinking. And Christ told them, well, they've received their reward. There's nothing more to pray for because they got what they was asking for. They got that notoriety. You got to be careful, you know, receiving those accolades and desiring them. They can cause one to do, before long, it becomes like a drug in and of itself. When we hear those accolades, it releases endorphins and dopamine in the brain, and it makes us feel good. And so pretty soon we're chasing that, and maybe the first time we received accolades, it was for the right thing, but then we start doing questionable things because we're chasing that notoriety, and we'll stop at no length in order to receive it. You know, look at today's politicians. They change with the wind, do they not? And that's exactly what they're chasing is notoriety because it means votes to them. The most popular guy wins. The guy with the most votes wins. So the most politicians will say and do whatever basically their base wants them to say and do. It's funny though, once they get in office, how many of them actually do what they said that they were going to do? Almost none of them. It leads to whatever gets the attention, whatever attention that we want, you know, or desire. Often motivated behind acts of service to God and man. In the military, people would, they called it backstabbing. They'd be friends to your face, but then as soon as you turn, or as soon as you were out of the picture, they were saying how bad you were and the decisions that you made or the things that you did, or they would go to the boss and then swear, "Hey, was you just in the boss telling about what I just did?" Oh, no, 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 that was no, I wouldn't do that. Well, how did he find out about it? Oh, I don't know. Somebody else must. Knowing full well that that's exactly what they were doing. Again, they're seeking attention and they're going about it the wrong way. We should not. The best attention to receive is the ones that are garnered for the service that you've done, not for the attention that you seek. And then the only person that we should seek to please is God Himself. Instead of getting caught, and we don't do it for prideful reasons, we ought to do it out of the love that we have for God. The pride of power and prestige can lead to sin. Over in Acts chapter 12, verses 21 through 23, we read, "And on an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes, took a seat upon the throne, and delivered an oration to them. And the people were shouting, and the voice of a God, and not of man. Immediately an angel struck him down because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last." We study this in Bible study, but Herod, pride got the best of it. Instead of pointing out to the people that whatever he said pleased them quite well, but he should have given God the credit. Instead, they started calling him a god, and it went to his head, and it caused him to lose his life. 1 Peter 5:3 says, "Not domineering over those in charge, but being examples to the flock." That's what we ought to do, is be an example. An example of how to be, not being an example to dominate or not to serve, but the pride of life will cause one to serve, not to serve, but to dominate, because we want to be in charge. It's my way or the highway. We see things that not as means for good, but for prestige. That's the whole motivation behind what we do. It isn't to do what is right, but it's to do what will get me the most accolades. That was very prominent in the Air Force as well. I don't know if I ever explained it to you guys, but in the Air Force, one of the areas of evaluation that you could be measured against was because the Air Force tried to promote community involvement, which is good. And it's good for the Air Force and it's good for the individual. They like to have people out in the community volunteering doing stuff because that can bring people into the Air Force. But for the servicemen member, often you can tell certain guys would only volunteer for the high profile events, if you will. They would only go to the events that was going to get them strong accolades, or that there would be high-ranking officials or public officials there. But if it was a mundane thing like picking up trash along the highway, couldn't find a volunteer one. Nor did they have any time. Hey, you going to help with highway cleanup this week? Oh no, I'm too busy. I got to go to a meeting that day. I'm sorry, I can't. They was always busy. But as soon as it was the volunteers for parking for a senator's event or whatever that was, they had time. I'll head that up. Yep, not a problem. And then you read in their what they call their annual appraisal, if you will, their EPR, enlisted performance report. led a team of 25 during senators' social event to secure parking and stuff like that. Again, was it good to do that? Yeah, it was good to volunteer to do that. And certainly that deed needed to be done, but it had the wrong motivations behind it. We shouldn't volunteer to do things, or we don't need to do things just based upon the prestige that we will receive. We got to do it because it's our service to do it. Do good unto all men, and certainly the least of the mundane things is what we should be probably volunteering for. Is it Christ Himself washed feet? Did He not? His disciples even got mad. Why are you washing our feet? He says, I came here to show you what it is to serve. We can look to Christ's life and see how we ought to be. The pride being righteous, can lead to sin as well. Consider Luke chapter 17 and verse 10. It says, so you also, when you have done all the things that you have been commanded, you say, we are not worthy servants. We have only done what was our duty. This is the parable of the unjust steward. And that's probably, I think, I've felt that was my most favorite parable that Christ gave. In that parable, He says, you go out and you serve your master in the fields all day long, and you come in from laboring all day. In other words, you're sweaty, you're dirty, and all that. You probably, in our modern world, all we'd be thinking about, I just want to get to bed. And he basically says, when you come in, your master, does he have a feast prepared for you? Does he say thanks for what you've done? No. Matter of fact, he asked you to prepare him a meal. And so you prepare that meal. And then he sits there and he eats it all. And again, does he say thanks? No. He doesn't even offer you to sit down and have a plate of the same food that you prepared for him. No, he does not. And in their world, that was perfectly acceptable, was it not? And he says, and so after everything's done, after your master's done, and after everything's gotten cold and it's time to clean up and stuff, you finally have an opportunity to get a little something that's left over. And do you expect your master, do you expect him to grovel and say, thank you, thank you, thank you? Look at all that you've done. No, that's our society today, is it not? That's the way it was in the Air Force. Oh my, you had to thank people left and right for just doing the simplest things, and it was all motivated by positive reinforcement, reinforce. The military used to have the idea that negative reinforcement. If you make it painful enough, they'll be willing to do it, and that was kind of the way it was. I think my father's told stories about days like that. Nowadays, it's a little bit, it's different. It seems like it's on the opposite side of the spectrum. And that's the gist of the parable is that you don't expect your master, or the masters back at that time, you don't expect them to grovel and give you accolades for the things that you've done. It was just simply your duty to do. And so in your service to God, the ultimate master, don't expect him to say how great thou art and how holy you are and all this and that. It's just simply your service. It's just simply your job to do. That's just simply the way you need to be. And that's all there is to it. So we don't need to go around looking for pride. We don't need to have anybody puff us up. We don't need to hear how great a job we've done. It was just simply our duty to do those things. Because, and whether it be teaching Bible class, being in the pulpit, singing a song, leading service, giving prayer, if your reason to be doing those things is so that you can hear how great a job you're doing it for the wrong reason. Pride. That's pure pride. Lastly, before we conclude, ethnic, social, and economic pride can lead to sin as well. Consider Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. So here we have a case of an individual who, I'll take it as he preferred to be in and amongst the Jews. And when he felt that the Jews weren't looking, he treated the Gentile brethren the same, would participate with them, would have a meal with them. But as soon as he thought that the Jews were looking or coming, he did what? Oh, I'm not with those guys. I'm sorry. I'm over here. I was just waiting here for you guys and just happened to see him over here. That type of thing. He denies being associated with. That's not the way we need to be as individuals. We're accepting of what? All people. We've probably all seen the ethnic movies where the white boy and the black boy are playing together as kids. They don't recognize, but then down south, back in the 40s, 50s, that wasn't acceptable. And as they grew up and came more wiser, especially the white one, came more wiser to the social dynamics of the era, could have nothing to do with being a friend. Thankfully, we don't live like that in our society today, but some people still think that way. All people are created by God, regardless of their social status, their ethnic status, or their economic status. How much one makes in a year doesn't have no bearing on the type of character that they are. And whether the guy's a millionaire or whether the guy is in destitute makes no difference. Makes no difference to God. If anything, God's heart is more with the one, it has always been with the poor. Where is our heart? And so we don't need to think in parameters of ethnic, social, and economic status. We should just see people for who they are and what they are, not their ethnicity, not what side of the tracks they come from, not what neighborhood they live in, or what school they attend. Because in the end, they may very well be a Christian as well. Or our fellow Christians. We should not shun our fellow Christians just because maybe they grew up in a different town, or played for a different sports team, or worked for a different employer, whatever the case may be. Thankfully, I don't think we have that problem here, but in some areas, these problems still exist. And they all are sins that lead from pride of life. So as we wrap up here tonight, certainly we need to take John's words to heart. if anyone loves this world, the love of the Father is not in him. Worldliness it can be subtle, and it's often hard to define and hard to detect. Often, it's only through methodical consideration and honestly evaluating one's true motives, and only you know your own motives. Those who know you may speculate. We can look to evidence, but we don't know what truly motivates you. Only you know what motivates you. So that's why I say it's hard to define and it's hard to detect. Worldliness is as old as man. Adam and Eve fell victim to all three of these sins, if you will. The pride of life, the lust of the eyes, and the lust of the world. And we see they were removed from the garden. Worldliness can be avoided by seeking first the kingdom of God. And that's what we need. That's what we need. That's Christ said, where your treasures are, that's where your mind will be too. That's where your thoughts will be. So where are your thoughts? Are your thoughts always on worldly things? Is it on, the things of this world? If it is, then maybe you got some work to do. Maybe it's not quite focused where it needs to be focused. And if you need help with getting that focus, perhaps call upon the prayers of the congregation. We're here. We're certainly glad, the prayers of a righteous man availeth much, as James says. So if you're subject to the gospel call in any shape, form, or manner, let it be known as we stand and sing the song of the chosen. God calling you.